We are back here in room 11 for a joint hearing with House Ways and Means and Senate Finance. It is 2:45 p.m. on Tuesday, February 18th. And we are joined by staff from the Department of Taxes to talk about the state guarantee proposed by the administration. Floor is yours.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, before you start, I just want to for House Ways and Means, I'm sorry, I had not realized that Senate Finance had not heard an initial walkthrough of this idea yet. Senate Finance, I'm sorry about that as well. So this earlier testimony might have been, I don't know. Anyway, so we're going to both hear the initial presentation that we heard on House Ways and Means, and then the deeper dive that was the response to our questions. So Senate Finance, you get the benefit of all the extra thinking that the tax did after we asked our questions. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for the record, I'm Rebecca Samaroff, the Deputy Commissioner at the Tax Department. That was a great summary, Chair Kornheiser, and that was actually pretty much all I was going to say today. So without further ado, I'll let Jake introduce himself.
I won't steal your thunder.
No, that's a lot of fun.
Thanks, Jake Feldman, Tax Department. Zoom. Oh, this may be being a little bit funny, but
There's one right in front of you.
so that's even better. Okay. Let me try this again.
So had some issues in here. Tech-related issues.
Yeah, it's much better. Yeah. All right, great. Thank you for having us in again to talk about state guarantee. And this does have some of the same things that we went over in Ways and Means last week, but also some of the follow-up. So it's a little bit more detailed. And this is for elective district education spending above the foundation formula. If districts choose to spend beyond the foundation formula. So hopefully my advancing is going to work from here. It just didn't, but
Can you project a little bit? There's an error machine.
yeah. So the state guarantee is a mechanism to compensate for different property tax bases between school districts if they choose to raise funds beyond what the state provides through the foundation formula. I think JFO just went over some data with you, and our data is pretty similar. I'm going to explain what's slightly different about it. But in the administration's proposal, there are 5 regional districts, and they have different grand list tax bases in each one. So the state guarantee helps equalize between them. It is based on average daily membership and projected grand list values, which are both available in early January. And the tax department could communicate to districts what their state guarantee will be in the coming year. For example, a district would know that if it's planning to spend $10 million beyond the foundation formula and its match rate for the state guarantee is 20%, then 8 million would need to be raised locally, and the state would provide 2 million because 20% of their 10 million is 2 million. And we put in this slide to try to help flesh this out a little bit, talking about how this would compare to current law. In current law, on December 1st, in the tax commissioner's letter, school districts get an estimate of the homestead yield, which is the most important number for them. They also get an estimate of income yield and the non-homestead rate. During December, they get weighted student counts from AOE, which is a very important figure because homestead tax rates are based on per pupil spending. And that's per weighted pupil, per long-term weighted ADM. And then there's kind of a gap in my table there, but, and during that period, the school districts are designing their budgets. The legislature is looking at budget information as it comes in. And then in March in current law, voters go to town meeting day and approve budgets. And then the legislature responds to those approved budgets by setting the yield amount, the homestead yield and the non-homestead rate to raise enough money for the entire education fund based on those voted budgets. And then later on, more like June, the tax department calculates the school district tax rates and then the town tax rates, which are after CLAs, and they send them out in June. So that's current law. In the foundation formula proposal, on December 1st, the commissioner could provide an estimate of the statewide base rate needed to fund the foundation formula. In the month of December, again, districts would get their weighted student counts from AOE. And then in possibly January, but possibly even earlier, districts get this match rate for the state guarantee from the tax department. And I'll say right here that in the first year, which is FY28, this is going to be a new thing. So we're going to have to provide some explanation. But in years following that, the match rate for individual districts should be very, very similar to what it was in the prior year. There's going to be a lot of consistency in it. So they could use a placeholder of the prior year's match rate and it would be good. But in January, we can give them what their match rate is going to be for the coming year. And then again, April to June, General Assembly is going to set the statewide base rate to fund the foundation formula. And the tax department is going to calculate district and town tax rates, which will be the base rate. And if they have chosen to spend beyond the foundation formula and a local rate too. Top.
Sure.
So a quick question, if we're contemplating a state guarantee, then we're, I guess, acknowledging right out of the gate that the base formula is not going to be sufficient, right? That's my first question. My second question is, are there any parameters around what the money can be raised for? And I don't know if you've talked.
I think both of those questions would be a little better answered by the Agency of Education, but I wouldn't, we have not allowed a mechanism for district spending because the foundation formula isn't sufficient. That's like really supposed to be a robust, much more than adequate, the desired education for people. I think the discretionary district spending is more, has a couple of reasons, like, allowing some local control to remain in the system, which is important to many folks. But then doing it in a way that, as Jake's about to get into, is capped and also is equalized. So we still have like kind of equal opportunity for districts to be making those additional decisions. And details around what exactly, like what good examples are of what a district might want to spend on above the foundation formula, I would refer to the Agency of Education for.
Okay, so using FY25 as an example, here's how we would determine the state guarantee number. We look at, for each of the 5 school districts, their average daily membership, so unweighted count, and then their taxable grand list. And the numbers that I have there might be slightly different than what JFO showed. And the reason is because those numbers include the homestead exemption proposal. The homestead exemption takes away from the taxable grand list in each region. So you could do it without the homestead exemption and you'd get slightly different factors. It still, holds and it works out, but this does include that. That's part of our proposal. So you get, by dividing the second column by the first column, you get a grand list per student. Like the Northeast region has $917,000 of fair market value per student. Whereas the Southeast region has almost 2 million. And in the proposal, there is a match provided up to the median, which in this case is the Champlain Valley region. So to bring the Northeast region up to the capacity of the Champlain Valley region, the state will need to kick in 28.1% of any of its spending beyond the foundation formula. Southwest region is a little bit closer to the median, so the state match is a lower 7.5%.
Where is the state getting the money to make the match?
The state is getting the money from the education fund, and it's, I'm gonna talk about the cost in a second.
Okay, but you're basically going to raise it from the towns that are over the median to give to the towns that are under the median. I don't know where else you get the money unless you've got a new income source.
Right, like all things in the education fund, it's paid for by the education fund's sources. So yeah, it's incorporated into everything. And yeah. So trying to do a hypothetical example here with made up numbers. If each of the 5 districts chose to spend $10 million over the foundation, then they would have, the Northeast region would get 28.1% of that from the state, which is $2.81 million. And then they would provide 7.19 locally. The Southwest region, which doesn't have as much of a state match, they would provide the majority of it locally, and the state would provide 750,000 because 7.5%, 10 million is 750,000. And then Champlain Valley is the median, so it's not eligible, and neither are the 2 districts that are over the median.
But if you take that total, 3.5 million or 3.5. That's gonna have to be raised from somewhere. It's gonna come out of the ed fund, which means that the rates on the other 3 are gonna have to go up. I don't know where else you're gonna get it.
And go ahead.
I see both Senator Hardy and Representative Felton.
I have a question that's different. So if you want to answer the chair's question, which I think is, yes, you would have to raise the taxes of everybody in order.
Well, let's let him answer.
I mean, the ed fund sources in the ed fund, it's difficult to say where a dollar comes from in the ed fund, right? It comes from 25% of the ed fund is homestead taxes, 40% of the non-homestead, you also have sales tax, you have rooms tax, and use tax, and so on. So where does a dollar come from? It comes from those sources. You can't attribute it to any one thing. But yeah, any new cost to the ed fund, accrues to property taxes, absent any other changes.
I just wanted to clarify, I think that means that the additional 2.8 and 750 would go into the education fund, and everybody would be paying to raise those additional amounts, not just the districts that are not going to receive a match.
That's right. Which is a tiny fraction of a penny on
Right.
that. Yep.
Right, but you're not taking from one and paying the other. Everybody's going to pay for this extra amount.
Good clarification. Thank you.
So what about within a district? Is there any equalization within, especially this ginormous district? Is it just, it's just, the tax rate is the same across the entire ginormous district, so tax rate in Whiting is the same as the tax rate in Shelburne.
Yeah, except that they're adjusted by CLAs.
Oh, so there would still be a CLA adjustment, okay, but that doesn't take into, except for the property exemption. It doesn't take into consideration the ability to pay.
It's exactly the same consideration. It's exactly the same setup as now, where all the towns in a school district have the same school district tax rate. And the homestead exemption is different than property tax credit, but it's, you know, a similar.
Right, but the district is so much bigger. I mean, there's a much broader difference between rural and rural and Franklin and Addison County and Chittenden County, which are all in the same district. That's a huge spread. And so there's no intra-district consideration of equalization.
I don't think so.
There's the CLA that would still apply to towns within the district differently.
Right.
Yeah. So similar to today. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the school board in Montpelier with Roxbury. And we have the same school district tax rate adjusted by the CLA in each town. And then there's property tax credits, but there's no differentiation between, you know, Montpelier ability to pay or something of that nature and Roxbury's.
Yeah, but it's just a much smaller differentiation.
It's the ginormous district that's asked to answer, just a little part of it.
I know, but it also begs the question of like, what would we be asking for the money for and how would they equalize it within the ginormous district? You know, and how, given the voting block power of the wealthiest part of the district, how would that be offset for, you know, the parts of the district that Senator Brock and I represent, because there's an inequity built into that district because it's so huge and has such variation of towns. But that, it's not your proposal, so, I mean, this is your proposal, but the district is not yours, so I'll stop giving you a hard time.
Representative Wilson?
Hate to ask my hypothetical, but, we've discussed earlier today, section 11 or 12 districts. Would the proposal be consistent in terms of establishing a median? And regardless of number of districts, whatever is below that median, whether it's 2 districts or 6.
Are you asking if there were 12, would the proposal still be?
Establish a median, then bring everybody up.
Well, the administration's proposal is 5 districts and going to the median. And I think if the legislature went to a different number of districts, then I think how much you equalize would also go along with that decision process.
Fair. And then second quick question is, in talking about, you know, being Brigham compliant, what was the logic behind the $10 million number for enactments of the foundation? Was that considered at all, or did it just seem like a good?
Oh, the 10 million on this slide is just like trying to help with the math.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll talk about, yeah.
It's a nice round number.
Yeah.
Not a specific policy proposal.
Okay.
As Jake will get into, that there is a recommendation to cap the possible
Right.
discretionary district spending at 5%. As an example, it's another policy choice, but I think something small is what's recommended because of the fact that the foundation formula provides everything that, you know, everything's necessary for a robust education. This would be.
So we should just take the number that.
Yes, exactly.
And the foundation formula is funded the way it's funded now, right? With the same combinations going into the ed fund. And you're not proposing any new income source in there. It's basically a new way of distributing what's in the ed fund. We're not, and the adjustment would be made on the property tax
I have, you said in April, that the legislature would determine the base amount. My question is, based on what? Because that's the problem we've had before, is that when the economy got tight, the base amount didn't get funded or completely funded. And I think we're going to need some kind of guarantee that we won't be playing games and decide this year we're not going to fund them, we're going to fund housing or road paving or whatever, all good needs. So I'm just, we talked about national standards, and are we still at the 13,200, which my local school, one of my local schools, I saw two last night, informed me would cause them a $16 million loss and would decimate their budget. I believe they laid off 20 people this year. So to raise, and still trying to figure out how the numbers are flowing here. I need a visual learning chart.
Well, I think we'll take us through a couple more examples of the state guarantee mechanism at least, but you're correct that in the original proposal, Ed Fund works very much as it is today. There's, not changes to the sources besides shifting that property tax to be a single statewide rate. And changing the,
60 and $1.10.
yeah, but they're interesting, policy decisions that become possible with a foundation formula that aren't possible in today's system, such as, more ways to protect that foundation formula piece of the ed expenditure, which we'd be happy to look at and model.
I probably should ask the ALE, what's envisioned for the school that we were told last year was spending $44,000 a student? What happens to that?
I do agree, that's a better question for the AOE. Yeah.
Can I just address that? Because that was my district and the reason they thought we were spending $41,000 a year.
No, the one I got told about was
But
further and west of yours.
well, what happened is when they did their analysis, they walked dollars back to district of origin, but they didn't walk back students to district of origin. So the denominator in their math was consistently off for any district that tuitions at any level.
No, this wasn't a tuition, this was
Or
a school district.
or that operates, like we're in two separate
Yes,
districts.
no, it was not anywhere near.
Their math was wrong all the way through the listen and
Yeah,
learn.
no, that one I didn't hear about.
It was
There's
pervasive.
another one, but it got attention because it was extremely high. Okay. Other questions?
Okay, so the $10 million was hypothetical, but I do want to share some more actual numbers from FY 25 to give you a sense of what the cost of this mechanism could be. Because that was a question from Ways and Means last week. So here are the match rates. And then the second column is real FY 25 spending over the foundation formula grant. And I guess I have to provide some context there. So if you took the existing school districts and then put them into those new bigger school districts and then provided to each one 13,200 per weighted pupil, then that provides the bulk of their education spending.
I'm sorry, I
But
just want to clarify what I'm looking at. So when you say FY 25, you're not talking about FY 25 existings. Are you talking about the existing spending for FY 25?
yeah,
Okay, so this is how much it would cost them if they were to spend exactly what they're spending. this fiscal year.
proposing.
except that it's capped at 5% over the foundation formula. So it's, and only a couple of them, I should have come with that, but only maybe 2 or 3 of them were actually capped, but I put
It
a,
would be helpful to know how much they were not able to spend.
yeah, I can get that for you.
Thank you.
But so this is spending beyond the foundation formula, capped at 5% above the foundation formula. And so the Northeast region is, you know, spending $11.2 million over the foundation formula. Their match rate is 28.1%, so the state guarantee would be 28.1% of that 11.2, which makes 3.2 million. And then Southwest region, the state would also have to kick in their $500,000. And the total cost would be $3.7 million. And then Representative Odie asked to see what tax rates would be. Tax rates are in the far right column. And you'll notice like there isn't much spread between the tax rates in the 5 districts. And the reason is because if you think about it, tax rates now are based on long-term weighted pupils, but there's a huge amount of variation in the 119 districts in the state. Like I think it's, you know, the highest is maybe twice as much as the lowest. This methodology is giving each district the same amount per weighted pupil. So that already is making things extremely consistent. And then on top of that, it's only allowing 5% in additional spending. So there's really little variation in spending per weighted student.
And is
that's
this
why you end up with
Total tax rate, or the tax rate just for spending over the cap?
total tax rate.
Total
The
tax rate.
total tax, as opposed to right now.
Right now, these regions don't exist. But this would be like the total equalized tax rate for the region.
And I just want to point out additionally with the slide, the spending over the foundation formula grant, you know, we have spending data from this year, but the proposal applies this foundation formula in FY28. So we're looking, you know, 3 years down the road when there's been a number of governance and education delivery changes. So just want to warn against using this figure as, you know, your idea of like what districts would want to spend in FY28, because we're looking at a much different delivery system.
I appreciate that, and it is very slow to turn a ship, especially given that there's putting more children in classrooms when the schools don't have the infrastructure to do that yet is might take more than 3 years, and we'll have inflation. And so I think it's hard for us to project any of this in the future right now, even though if we want to try. I'm curious. Also, the decision to do a percentage for the match rate rather than sort of a per pupil or something else like that, like what brought you to that policy recommendation?
That's a good question. I mean, that's a policy choice for sure. I mean, I think that it is capped is definitely, you know, something that the administration feels strongly about, and we think it's an important idea too.
I mean, the pupil consideration is in there. It's looking at what is your tax base per student. So that's how it adjusts for the pupil count. And then the percentage is filling the bottom 2 up to the median, so that they have the same capacity as the median per student.
But when you were sort of weighing the trade-offs on doing it this way rather than on a per pupil basis, which would sort of, both are using the weight slightly differently. I'm curious how you came to that.
Oh, well, we should also add that this is a model that's currently used in Utah, this state guarantee mechanism. So I think that was probably a big part of our initial decision making too. I believe that one also has a over foundation formula as the basis of the match rate. Right and true.
Right, so we didn't invent this ourselves, is what Deputy Commissioner Sandhoff is saying. But I'm thinking about how to do it on a per pupil basis, and it might take me a little while.
Okay, let's talk about next time.
13.2 is foundation base rate we've been given. Weights are added above that. Okay, and they're done more as a categorical grant. They're meant for you to use to provide that service, whereas now you could be using it to lower your tax rate. Within these huge districts, there is a huge disparity of towns in many of them, rich towns, poor towns, big towns, little towns. If 3 big towns in my district decide they want to build a sports complex, and we're still there with 5 school board members, I've asked, and I still haven't found out how the money flows. Does it flows into that 5-member school board at the big 5 humongous district, and then that school board decides how that money flows down each school, I gather, out of that money gets their individual per student foundation formula. And the district or that 5-member board, I need to tell you how well that's sitting with local school boards. That 5-person board would make the decision as to whether or not to raise the additional revenue and what to do with it. But rich towns, poor towns, little towns would all have to pay for the decision of that board. So 3 of those board members really are into lacrosse. And they want to build an indoor lacrosse stadium or whatever. They can vote to do that. Do the individual towns get any say? I mean, we are going from micro to macro, and I have been told, I can't tell you how many times, that is not the Vermont way. We don't do things like that. We pride ourselves in democracy. This is a power grab by the governor who hates public education. What else was I told last night? What do I say to these people? Because I think I'm understanding those 5 people are going to decide. There's no local vote except maybe because somebody said today that there would be a local vote. I think maybe that was the way it works today. There's a local vote. If there's any local vote in this, it would be on your curriculum, which you don't usually vote on, or on how you divide up.
There would be a local vote on, whether or not to raise additional revenue over the foundation formula. That's something that I feel like we know with some confidence in terms of like the rest of the dynamics of how these large boards would work with the, discretion that's, allotted to them to make decisions for the district. I think that would be better directed at the Agency of Education, because while our tax mechanism is very elegant and slick at equalizing.
Okay, so could
Equalizing.
I don't know how many towns in Winooski Valley, each one of them vote. Now, the property wealth in those towns varies widely, but we're getting one equalizing factor. Could each one of them vote like to raise 5% more to do an enhanced music program, and the town next door votes to raise 5% more to do a financial literacy program or to hire a an additional mental health counselor? And what do we do with the one nurse for 750 students that are spread out over probably 100 square miles?
I think these are,
Maybe next Tuesday, we can ask the
Yeah.
Agency of Education
Okay.
to join us and they can answer some of these
But
questions.
are you envisioning a vote at the local level to spend that 5% more? My understanding is all decisions are made at the top. I haven't heard. Is there any power left at the bottom?
It's the advisory boards.
I think that, these are questions for AOE. And then I would also say that it's not like Vermont is trying to invent something new. It's more like Vermont is trying to do what is established in 40-something other states. So in terms of how the money flows, like, I think there's probably good precedent and good approaches out there. And AOE and APA, their consultant, would be the experts on that. As far as the vote goes, my understanding of it would be, first of all, the state would be giving a foundation formula, which here's the money. Craig Bolio, former commissioner, called it the bags of cash approach. It's here's the money. But then there's a question of, would you like to spend beyond what the state provides? And I think that would be a vote out to all voters in the district, and they would be able to make a decision on it. And as a school board member, I'm imagining that we would probably have to say, what is this extra money that we're thinking of for? Is it for an indoor lacrosse?
So that,
stadium?
there would be a
So
local
on.
vote on the spending. We're gonna have to look at the numbers. One of my school boards said they're gonna lose $16 million, and they've already laid off 20 people, and they're coming in with a 5% increase, so.
Speaking of a local vote, I wonder, is this tax rate that you're sharing with us, is that uniform for homestead and non-homestead?
Yeah, and I wouldn't, so.
That was a question that I believe Senator Chittenden had before before you arrived.
Yeah,
And so that's a big difference actually between what we're doing now.
yeah, it's lower. And that's combined state and local. But again, as Deputy Commissioner Samroff mentioned, this is for FY 28 and so much can change. So I don't think there's, I put it there for comparison, but I'm not sure how much credence to put into it.
But under current law, we just have the homestead fluctuating, right?
With local spending, yeah.
Yes, and so under this construct, it's homestead and non-homestead that would be fluctuating with local spending.
Yep.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay. What is this? Oh, so what if we did a full match? That means instead of just matching up to the median, we would be matching up to the maximum tax capacity district, which happens to be the Southeast region. In that case, we would, believe it or not, have to match Champlain Valley. They're actually below the Southeast region in taxable grand list per student. The state would need to provide 11 million of their 32 million that they're spending over the foundation formula. And the total state guarantee would be now 24 million compared to 3.7 million before.
And by full match, you mean the top district is what we're matching to rather than the median district?
That's right.
Okay.
So it costs a bunch more. Still doable. Okay.
Yes, Representative Masson.
Thank you. In considering how we match, what we match. my take on that, and you can reinterpret what you think I'm thinking, is collectively, we're looking for different mechanisms that might seem to make sense. At least that's what I think I hear you saying. But I was talking to someone else earlier about Cinderella analogy, right? We've got Cinderella walking around with one glass slipper. No one knows it's there except her. And the handsome prince comes in and the glass slipper falls out. Having tried to see if the glass slipper will fit on Drusilla or whatever the other, trying to find something that fits.
Is that the wicked stepsister?
Pardon?
Is that the wicked stepsister? Is that what you're doing with
Yeah.
Drusilla there? Okay.
So anyway,
We'll follow the story.
nobody's.
We don't want to be a wicked stuff.
But we're trying to figure out a mechanism that'll fit Cinderella's foot. At least that's what I think I'm hearing yesterday, today, these various other kinds of things. And if you think I'm not understanding well enough, please feel free to say, no, Jim, we've got a way to get from here to there. But I'm being sort of cynical and I don't see it yet. I mean, we're trying all kinds of different slippers on different feet. But I don't see how we're gonna get to something that we all agree on yet.
Yeah, no, I like that analogy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so are we trying to find a glass slipper? Kind of. And I think the slipper that we found is pretty good. I think the current law slipper has some problems.
Cracks,
Cracks.
foundation.
So, yeah, and I would note on this slide, there's really very little variation in the tax rate. So, there's like just a lot of parity between the districts when you do it this way, especially when you match the full match rather than median.
It does mean more state exposure. And to Rep. Feltus's point, that means more shouldered by all the other education sources like the property tax.
Did the administration's contemplated proposal, if a district did not want to spend anything above the foundation grant, would that mean in their mind, no votes would have to occur? Then
Not from a tax perspective, that might be, there's some unknown unknowns for me out there in terms of if there'd be another reason to have a vote of the whole district in AOE's eyes, but certainly not for revenue raising purposes.
in this foundation amounts that you're doing here, that includes categorical aids or adjusting in aids with the weights. Is that correct? The spending above and beyond.
The categorical grants are totally separate. So it's more the foundation formula is really more analogous to the education spending line of the Ed Fund Outlook.
So not categorical aids, but the weights that are contemplated, those are all baked into that foundation.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Since we're talking about not completely specific to this anymore, but I have an order of operations question because of the way that you explained long-term weighted average. And then, so you calculate this, so like this is the number of pupils, then you apply the weights to that number of pupils and you get a long-term weighted average. And then you take that long-term weighted average and you multiply it by 13,200 and that's how much you get. Is that the order that you're doing the operations in?
Yeah, AOV does this process on
Yes,
tax.
well,
I think that's
Well,
right.
that's what, so that there's like the 13.2, there's not a difference, there's not there's not an amount above the 13.2 that is relevant, there's just people count gross up that's relevant.
Right, what the 32 gets
Yeah.
applied to.
Okay.
What I haven't seen on a chart is, maybe it's in that one with all the numbers, is what schools are spending today. And 13.2, what's the average per pupil spending at this point?
That would be interesting to show the current law 119 school districts and what they spend now per weighted pupil and what they would be getting under the foundation formula.
That would be very helpful.
It would take a little crosswalking though, right? Because some of what has, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but some of the things that used to be line items on the outlook that were outside of ed spending are now getting baked into the foundation formula and maybe vice versa too. Like, is it a clean ed spending equals foundation formula?
I'm sure it would be way complicated, more complicated than what I just said. So
Okay, see, that's.
But maybe not impossible. I think we definitely need to partner with Amy on that one.
What I think is a fairly frugal system telling me they're going to lose $16 million on day one. That makes me somewhat concerned, so it would be helpful if we could start baking, I'm sure there are winners and losers here. And I'm pretty sure every business manager and superintendent in the state, as soon as this becomes available, will be calculating and calling us. And it would be helpful if we could say to them, no, you're going to make out or you're going to lose out, but you can raise additional money on a local vote, or you can raise an additional money if every other town in the district. Because if you do it locally, then you're into local taxing capacity, and that's not what's envisioned up there. I mean, I have towns that have a lot more taxing capacity.
that's what we're getting at. We're trying to equalize between, so first off, there would be, in the proposal, there are just 5 districts instead of the 119. So to say that my district would be a loser or a winner, is sort of difficult because your district would be included with many other districts. So
Delivery changes, governance changes.
delivery changes and governance changes, but there's a local tax on the local grand list with a state support to try to equalize between them.
Can I clarify a question? So I think I heard you say that categorical grants, et cetera, are separate. Do you mean in your calculation of the tax rate, did you include total spending from categorical grants?
Same as now.
Well, so now tax rates are calculated with the total spending needed from the ed fund, which includes the categorical grants.
Taxes are based on education spending, which is budget, minus offsetting revenues, which is all those categorical grants leads to education spending.
And that base tax rate that it's all based on includes all the spending out of the entire education fund, including categorical grants.
Yeah, like to the extent that the property tax is currently like a backstop for the whole system, being the one revenue source that you can flex the rate for, or that we generally flex the rate for. I guess you could flex other rates.
Yes.
To that extent, there's a foundational impact.
So the full amount needed to be raised by the education fund, including categorical grants, is included in these final tax rates that you're
Okay, yeah.
sharing.
Yes.
Okay, it's not like there's like other money floating somewhere that we need to raise some other way separate from. Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry that my question was confusing. Thank you, that's helpful. Representative Kimball, and then let's maybe pause on questions until the slide deck is finished. Does that sound good? Okay.
Mine's specific to this slide and the one before. So when you're doing the full cap versus the cap to the medium or matching to the median. So the difference in tax rates is very marginal, right? Because that's across the entire tax base, 1.29 to what's the other highest rate, 1.31. So is that right? Am I reading this correctly? That's by having everyone contributing into the pool more, essentially? Tell me why that's true.
A large part, it's because of the 5% cap.
Yeah.
And then I think, yeah, and the foundation formula is making it so everyone is already spending the same amount, basically, for long-term rated people. So there's just very little variance.
Representative Kimball's point, you also have the spending over the FF grant to be approximately 3%, because even with 3% for Champlain Valley. So I'd be curious to run the numbers if the spending over grant was proportionally a much more variable across each of these large 5 districts. But I'd also love to see this with the 11 districts we just saw rather than these 5 districts.
And so the final slide is.
Oh, there was only one left when I said that?
There's 2 left, second to last. And ultimate slide is, what if there were 12 districts? Which, you know, I know there's a lot of different ideas, but the point of this is just to show that you can still do it, but it takes more effort because there's more variation in grand list per student. Like the difference between a Caledonia Essex district and Lamoille, which happens to be the top, is almost 3 times as much. So that means it's not quite 3 times, but it's almost 3 times. So the state would have to support Caledonia Essex at a 60% match rate to bring it up to Lamoille's capacity. So it's doable, but it would just cost quite a bit more.
And just to reiterate again, the cost of the match under 12 districts and under out of 12, the other district was. In both cases, the cost of the match is fully integrated into the tax rate because it's being raised out of the education fund.
Yes.
Okay, I'm asking all these questions because some of the AOE numbers aren't adding up the way I expected them to, and I generally assume that you all of your numbers will add up, but I'm sort of over verifying right now in the interest of due diligence.
No, so the other ed fund costs, remember like a few slides ago, matching to the median, and a 5% cap only was costing the ed fund 3 point something. So that is, that would be a new cost to the ed fund, and that's the original proposal.
Is this slide a full match?
Full match.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do a match to a median here and it would cost less.
Where's the total cost on this one? I don't.
I don't have it. I showed it just to show the effort of the match rate. I'm not sure that I have a foundation formula amount for this configuration. The only one we have is 13,200 for 5 districts. And there would also be different long-term weighted ADMs, which I don't have. So I couldn't get that deep. So key takeaways here, it's an effective, reasonably good Cinderella slipper mechanism for correcting for tax-based disparities between school districts for elective spending beyond the foundation formula. We could the tax department could communicate the match rates to districts in January. They should be very similar year over year. They will not be bouncing. It works well with 5 districts, but would require more funding with more districts. It costs less if the state guarantees up to the median than if the state guarantees up to the max. And finally, it costs less if the spending beyond the foundation formula is limited to a set percentage such as 5%, which is what AOE is recommending. And that is all.
Many people have questions about the third bullet. Why?
The extra word. Can I start?
To answer the question? Well, let's have this witness.
But you didn't ask the question.
Why does it
Why?
cost more?
Oh, I thought you were asking why people had questions.
I don't ever ask why people have questions. No, I don't ever ask.
They don't have questions.
We are here to have questions.
So we have one on the table.
Why with 12? Does it cost more?
Why does it cost more to do 5 than 12?
It costs less with 5 than 12. So the reason that it costs more with 12 is because there's more variation in how much grand list is available per student. That's why it costs more. So you'd have to do quite a bit of matching to bring Caledonia Essex up to Lamoille's capacity or up to the medium capacity. I haven't crunched the exact numbers, but I can tell you that that is the case.
I think Senator Hardy's gonna ask the same thing as me, but proportionally, those matching amounts will be smaller because the districts are smaller. So I'm really struggling with the point you're making. Regardless, I would love to see the at VBSA breakouts with this same analysis. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the similar thing. And also the analysis that you did also was able to narrow the difference between the grand lists. And so I don't think it's necessarily true.
You could intentionally design 12 districts that had the exact same grand list per student, but it would be weird looking.
Not a district.
One strength fiscal's been using for us are the school districts. So we have, right?
Do you mean the VBSA? This.
Yes. Yeah.
Vermont School Board
It's a
Association.
School Board Association districts. And that's, I believe, 11. And I think that's kind of what we've been looking at prior to today.
Yeah, send it over. I'm curious. I don't think I've seen it yet.
So
Julia will.
we can get you a copy.
You know where your materials live.
Everybody's having their own numbers.
That's great. That's important.
Teddy,
And just seeing that breakdown of the SBA districts with a full match and up to the median. Just so we can compare those two.
I'll give it a try.
Any other? Okay. Thank you very much for your time and answering so many different and varied questions. We are gonna conclude our hearing now. We'll have another joint hearing next Tuesday, and I'm sure we'll all see each other in the interim. Thanks.